Mary, it is an absolute privilege to welcome you to the Royal College of Physicians of Ireland today. Thank you for giving up your time to spend with us. In my lifetime, and in the lifetime of many people listening here today, you have been an inspirational leader, a trailblazer, a real visionary. And to get the opportunity to talk to you about lessons of leadership from your experience is really a privilege. I'm aware that you graduated as one of 4 ladies from your law class in Trinity. Were you conscious of that at the time, that you were already trailblazing? And then when you went away to Boston to study, did that shape and change your thoughts and practices?
My time in Trinity had an influence on me, and I loved being auditor of the Law Society. That was a leadership role in its own way, if you like. But Harvard really changed me. It was an incredible year to be there. I'm the class of 1968, which meant I went in late August 67, so 67 to 68. And I found that most of my American contemporaries were trying to either avoid the Vietnam draft at the time or just criticize an immoral war. Martin Luther King was assassinated in April, and Robert Kennedy was assassinated just after I graduated in June. Those were terrible events at the time, much more impactful than they would be now because of such a violent world. But what really impressed me was the leadership of my contemporaries, my friends. They weren't going into Wall Street firms to make money. They were going into poverty programs and civil rights in the south of the country. And they weren't going in, in a way, they were going in to change things. They were going in to lead. So I came back to Ireland full of what my husband-to-be, Nick, who has a good sense of humor, called my Harvard humility. Of course, he meant the opposite. And without that year in Harvard, I would never have dared to challenge the following year the fact that it was elderly male professors who represented Trinity in the Senate and indeed National University, and then went forward and got elected at the age of 25. It was Harvard that gave me that sense of young people being prepared to give leadership.
Right, and I think even just listening to that, part of that that's so encouraging is when you went, you came back, and our doctors are travelling abroad, gaining skills, and indeed we have international doctors coming over to us to gain similar skills. And when you came back, and I know you've led so much of the change in this country where, from a social justice and civil rights perspective in our country. So I'm sort of fast forwarding to your role as president, which is leaving out an enormous amount of ground. But that presidency, that election was transformative for this country. And your presidency has been widely recognised as being a transforming presidency. But if I can take you back, I was in the States at the time, and my mother sent me a cutting from one of the papers of the candle in the window, or the light in the window, and the Orson Uthron, with a letter saying, you better come back at some stage. How did that idea come to you? What did it stand for then, and what does it stand for now?
A very interesting series of questions. I had learned as a senator, I was a member of the Senate for 20 years, I had learned that we were neglecting our emigrants. I had visited emigrant centres in the UK, in Boston, in Canada, in Australia, and they were doing such good work with no support from Ireland. We just didn't. In fact, I often quote my friend Evan Boland, her poem, The Irish Emigrant, and the first line is more or less, we put them out like lamps in the dark. We just didn't. Families tried to keep in touch, but as a country, we didn't. So that was the point of the light in the window, that we cared about those who'd had to leave Ireland. That was my original real thought. I just never expected that that light would take on a life of its own. Yeah, really. I mean, it worked 24/7 for those 7 years. Yeah. And I never really got to mention it because I was always greeted by, we know you have a light in the window and you have no idea how much it matters. So I realized that. But just to answer your full question, now I realize that that light has helped to shape an Irish diaspora and that the policies followed very quickly. We now have very good policies towards immigrants, and we do care as much as immigrants themselves know that light, which my successors also have their light, is a way of symbolizing the connection.
Yeah, and I think it's very important because I think, one of the things that concerns me a little in Irish society at the moment, and you've led this by example about the importance of inclusivity and equity. There are some things happening within our society that you'd rather not see happen. So I think it's still an agenda item for us to keep pushing forward on. Would you agree?
I do agree, and the other thing that I remember very well was marking the 150th anniversary of the Gorta Mór, the famine, and going to different countries, but also here in Ireland, opening monuments, statues, etc. That's part of our history. And I loved the story of the Choctaw people, the Choctaw Indian tribe, who in 1847 raised $173 and gave it to Irish famine victims. They didn't know anything about us except that we were starving because of a famine, a crop that had failed for the third time, and they understood that. And that was a pure act of humanitarian relief and help. Yeah. And I was able to celebrate those. I went to Oklahoma to thank the Choctaw people on behalf of the people of Ireland in 1997, 150 years later.
Wow.
And we need to remember these parts of our history in order that we continue to be a welcoming nation for those who have to leave war zones or who desperately have to leave their country.
I had a flashback to a Leaving Cert English essay I had to do called Lessons of History, and it sort of leads me into the next question with you and your role as the UN Commissioner for Human Rights, and it's really picking up on what you're talking about, the Indians. I've seen you both speak eloquently and passionately on many human rights issues. We're sitting in the college surrounded by international and Irish greats of medicine, and we have members and fellows of our college who are working out in different parts of the world and have come over here to train. And I look at, they practiced back in the 1800s and 1900s, and you referenced this, in times of war, famine, and pandemics. And you look at the world now, and centuries later, we're still having similar experiences. For you, with all you continue to do in that area of human rights, what do you want to see happen now?
Well, this is a very difficult time because we're seeing the wrong approach by many leaders, but particularly one notable leader, President Trump in the United States, is leading so badly in a populist, autocratic, selfish, narcissist sense. And this is really bad for the world. So I have to say, one of the things that I remember very well from my time as High Commissioner was the importance of going to the places where people were suffering most so that you could help get their voice out, help to make it known. And I was recently at the Rafah border with Helen Clark, a fellow elder of the elders that Nelson Mandela brought together. And we were there to show the truth that this was a man-made famine, deliberately done, deliberately blocking food and medicine getting in, full lorries being refused for no reason at all, silly reasons, and a very deliberate famine that has now been officially declared, and also an unfolding genocide, which is really shocking. I mean, this is, in my lifetime, the worst of times, which means we have to dig deeper and fight back.
Absolutely, and I think you referenced our own Gorta Mór. We're not that far, it's not that distant in our own history.
Indeed.
And it is a challenge for each and every one of us, but it's sometimes difficult to feel powerful when you feel you're powerless in situations like this. So to have your leadership doing that on our behalf is hugely important for us, and thank you for that. And that sort of leads me on, actually, and you mentioned the elders. For us, I actually got it, my father gave me a gift of Nelson Mandela's Long Walk to Freedom, and my wife gave me a gift subsequently of your book, Everybody Matters, and they're two extraordinary reads. But I'm really interested in our college. I'm interested in the wisdom and experience you bring to that role. And in our college, 25, actually medics, doctors in the country and around the world, 25% of practitioners are over the age of 55. And I worry that we're going to lose access to that wisdom and experience in the years to come within the healthcare sector. I wonder, from your learnings, so how do the elders come about? Because I know Nelson Mandela himself was keen that you were a member of that. And how What are you doing in that role now? What can you do in that role? And have you any suggestions for us in healthcare?
Well, the Elders were founded in 2007, which was on Mandela's 89th birthday. I attended a planning meeting with him before that in South Africa, and it was a great honor to be chosen to be one of the 12 elders that were brought together to help carry forward his legacy during his lifetime, and in particular after his death, to work for human rights, peace, and a stable environment. And we still do that. In fact, we have 3 existential threats that we work on: the climate and nature crisis, the pandemic crisis, because we still haven't learned properly how to address the pandemic issue, even though we now have a pandemic treaty, but still there is not in place a way of doing it equitably, properly. And thirdly, the nuclear crisis, the nuclear weapons crisis. And so we're quite active. I'll be attending the UN General Assembly before the end of this month, and I'll be using my voice with my fellow elders as much as possible on all 3 issues.
But even here, you list them like that. I can see how there could be parallels for us to work on in the healthcare sector to not lose access to the tremendous years of experience and wisdom that doctors build up in healthcare to the service.
Can I mention a medical role that I played for a few years, which I don't think I particularly talked about in my book?
Wow.
And it involves Nelson Mandela before he formed the Elders. I had been at his inauguration. I had paid a state visit, which was a lovely visit because there was no nasty issue. It was all great friendship. And I was in my office as High Commissioner when the phone went, and I couldn't believe that it was Nelson Mandela on the phone, post his time as president. And he asked me, would I serve on the newly formed Gavi Fund Board? And I kind of wasn't sure. And he said, it's about vaccinating children. I want you to serve with me. So I said, of course. So I served on the fund board. He chaired it at the beginning. Then Graça Michel chaired the board. And then I became the chair when the decision was taken that we would try to amalgamate the Gavi Fund and the Gavi Alliance. And I was in charge of managing that, which was enormously boring, bureaucratic. And I thought my parents would laugh at me. You know, having gone the legal profession, my 2 elder brothers had become doctors. I became a lawyer. My 2 younger brothers became lawyers. I'd gone that route, and now here I was.
An expert in vaccination.
An expert on vaccination. But now, you know, to the point of how difficult things are, the United States has cut funding to Gavi. The United States is denying vaccines through Robert Kennedy Jr., a terrible leader of health in the United States. These are really difficult times.
They're really difficult times, and I know within the context of the college here, we're very involved in One Health and in pandemic preparedness, and you've highlighted it's back to this lessons of history. We're not good at picking up on lessons for the past, are we?
Not really, no.
Can I ask you, I heard you talk about, and this brings us back to climate, health and change, I think. I heard you talk about things changing for you when you looked through life from the lens of a grandparent. And I really loved the quote, but what did that do for you?
I think it was just holding our first grandson, Rory, in my arms, just newly born. And I had been talking a lot about 2050, which is a big date in climate. And I thought, my goodness, he'll be 47 if he has a good life. And I sort of changed at that moment and was able to think 100 years ahead in a different way. Wow. Because people, babies born today will live right through a crisis that we are creating and not getting on top of enough.
Yeah, and I mean, it is so important because within the context of the college here, you know, we have a very active climate health committee.
Yes.
We've people looking actively at sustainability, and I think we need reminders like that. And it's very hard sometimes when you're in one bubble to look outside it. It's getting so another perspective is always great to hear.
I think the grandparent perspective is really important because we have to think of future generations, and there's now more of a focus on long-term leadership, which the elders promote, which is the idea that you should think, especially on big problems, they require thought, they require scientific knowledge and evidence, especially at the global level, and they require thinking, how will this affect future generations? Not just now, no populism, short-term decision-making, but longer-term, thoughtful decision-making.
Right, it's really interesting. You must have read our new strategy at some point because there are 3 pillars in the college that we're basing our training and continuous learning for doctors in the future. And it's based around the translation of science, so education,
Yes.
science and evidence, and translation of research into practice. And in a world that we live in today, where misinformation, disinformation, and you referenced some of this yourself earlier, and social media make it extraordinarily difficult to champion truth. How do you, in a world that's skeptical of science, champion evidence?
I do it wholeheartedly because I have another hat. I'm a guardian of the planetary boundaries, which is a rounded way of looking at all the ecosystems that keep us alive and that have the planet in what has been a good phase, but we're moving out of it now into a more difficult phase. And science is at the essence of it. In fact, one of the things we'll be doing in New York at the end of this month is launching a second planetary health system, which I recommend that you and your colleagues look at carefully. We do it in terms of health, because the health of the planet is about the health of people. We are nature, and the health of nature and the health of the planet itself is all about our health as well. So the nexus is very strong.
Well, and actually, interestingly, later this month, we've actually got a climate health meeting, actually centrally in the college here, so I will look into that. Thank you for the suggestion. You referenced one particular leader a little while ago, and I guess my question more specifically about the misinformation, disinformation piece is when you have a person of influence who misrepresents facts, or a person of influence who misrepresents or distorts the facts, how do you actually stand up to that when it's a hostile listening ear?
I think it's important to stand up to bullies. I think it's important to, speak out when something is clearly wrong and misrepresented. And I regret that President Trump, who's so anxious to get the Nobel Prize, hasn't understood that if he focused on Israel at the moment, he could really take steps to have some credibility, because the people of Israel are coming out in their thousands wanting a ceasefire. Hamas wants a ceasefire. Only Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't want a ceasefire. So he could actually make much more progress on that issue if he wanted to. But unfortunately, he's not looking in that direction. I think it's important to speak out about this, as I have done. I was on CNN the other evening saying exactly this.
But it's the courage of speaking truth to power, as you do so frequently, that is inspirational in itself to us. And it's why the opportunity to sit with you in a college like this is so important for our members and fellows listening to you. And it sort of leads on to the idea. So I believe in our healthcare service that the greatest asset in the healthcare service is the people who work in it. They're committed, compassionate, brave people working at times of increasing expectation, increasing demand, increasing capacity issues.
I've had enough experience personally and through my husband to be able to validate everything you say about the quality of healthcare in the terms of the people delivering. It's extraordinary in this country. And there's a human rights reason for that I recommend to you, because it's encouraging to those who are working in that area. It's Article 29, the first sentence of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It has 30 articles. The second last article we've neglected too much. And it's very simple. It says everyone has duties to the community in which alone they reach the free and full expression of their personality. In other words, you must know you have duties to the community, and if you do something, you yourself become a better, fuller, rounded person. Okay. Isn't that a wonderful idea?
That's a wonderful idea. And I think even as I hear you say it, not alone, as an individual, I have a duty to the community, but I think the community has a duty to the individuals who are providing that type of care. And what I think I mean by that is that for if you look around healthcare, I think you value healthcare workers not by the salary you pay them. You value them by the respect and dignity with which they're treated in the workplace, and the respect and dignity with which they're treated in the community. And we need to be conscious of that in this country, because our healthcare service is very dependent on, the WHO are predicting that by the year 2030, 5 years from now, there will be a deficit of 11 million healthcare workers in the world. So healthcare workers who go into it for the right reason need to be encouraged, supported by not just a salary, but by respect and dignity. And you've led that in loads of guys. The other thing, and this really comes to the point for, one of the big things for us having the privilege of sitting down with you here is you, and I hope you're comfortable with this, are such an inspiring person and such an inspiring leader. If you look around in healthcare, and even with your own personal experience that you refer to there, if you look around at healthcare now, what attributes would you like to see us as a college instill in doctors and other healthcare workers who will be leading the delivery of healthcare and will be leading, will be the clinical leaders of the future?
I'm not sure I am fully qualified to answer that important question, but I suppose what I would always value is a capacity to really listen. And I take that from my own father. I'm lucky enough to have been the daughter of 2 GPs. And after 5 of us arrived in 6.5 years, my mother didn't practice anymore. But my father was a very vocational doctor, and I remember him well. He always took time with people. And I say that because as a small child going out on a call with him to a very poor home, he would go in and I would wait for him to come out and finish the story he'd been telling me. He was a great storyteller. And he'd come out and I'd see him on the porch talking to the woman of the house for 10, 15, 20 minutes, because that is when he learned more about the medical side. And I think that's a really important lesson. I've taken it into my human rights work, but it's also very important in healthcare.
You mentioned Evan Boland, and as you were talking there, I was thinking of a poem Seamus Heaney wrote called Out of the Bag, just when you were talking about your father. And Seamus Heaney thought that when the visiting doctor arrived, he associated with a new baby arriving because he'd go up into the thing. But Seamus Heaney had a lovely quote about believe a further shore is reachable from here. With all of your experience and all you've been through, and when you look at the world today and you look at the challenges there are you hopeful?
I'm hopeful because I'm obliged by Nelson Mandela, and indeed I learned how to do it through Archbishop Tutu. I was on a panel with him more than 20 years ago now in New York in front of young people, and he was very enthusiastic. And the moderator said very accusingly, Archbishop Tutu, why are you such an optimist? And he said, oh no, I'm not an optimist. I'm a prisoner of hope. Wow. And that became my way of explaining. You have to be a prisoner of hope. Why? Because if you are, you see the possibility. The glass may not be half full, but there may be something there in the bottom of it. And you work with that, and you work with others, you collaborate, and you make small steps, and you move forward. Take the climate issue. If you talk about the climate issue as being as serious as it is, without qualifying that we can solve it with political will, all the energy goes out of the room. So yes, we have to talk about it as being very serious, but in fact, it's totally manageable. It's all a matter of switching from fossil fuel to clean energy and doing it more quickly. That's completely doable. So, that's the difference. You bring the hope. The hope is through action. Okay,
well, if Mary Robinson, Nelson Mandela, and Archbishop Tutu can say to me to remain hopeful, I can take that as a given.
You have to
remain hopeful. Can I ask you one nearly last question? You have been in the public eye for almost all of your career, and all of us have ups and downs in our personal lives and our public lives. How have you stayed so resilient, and have you any tips for us from a well-being perspective to stay well?
I think it is important to try to stay well. I walk quite a lot. I don't exercise. I don't do wonderful gymnastics or gym exercise, but I recognize that it's important. I feel I've been very lucky in my life. I've been very supported. I was supported running for the Senate at the age of 25. I was supported running for the presidency. I was supported by the Irish government to become UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. I have always felt that it's not so much what I have done. I've been on the shoulders of so many that I've been helped to do. And so those who supported me are included in that honour.
Well, even listening to that, among the many qualities you've had, I think, and I talked to you about it beforehand, you can add humility in spades to that, because what you've achieved for Ireland, what you have achieved for the world in terms of your advocacy has been hugely important for us as a country and hugely important to us as leaders. So a huge thank you for that and what you do. I'd one last question. So I polled some people, if I got a chance to ask Mary Robinson a question, what would they want asked? So we've covered a lot of ground and you listed some things, but the one question I was asked to ask you is, in all your experience with all you've done, do you think Mayo will ever win an All-Ireland football final again?
You know, I'm delighted you asked that question because it allows me to make a really serious point. Yes, of course they will. Someday, maybe not in my lifetime, but more importantly, the importance of humour. And I think that also links with what we were talking about in well-being. I'm fortunate that we had great humour in my family. When I'm asked by younger women in particular now, maybe young women doctors, have you any advice? I normally say, look, I don't really have any advice. You know better than I do your situation. But I said, take this if you wish. Use humour more. Use humour more in your life and in your public work. You probably are very funny at home with your family, and then you're very serious because you're a woman. You're more serious because it was harder to get there. There were more barriers, and you don't use humour as much. So humour is incredibly important. That's one thing I learned in spades from the elders. Right. I mean, we laugh a lot as elders. Right. We laugh with each other, we tease each other, we have fun together, precisely because humour is so important.
A massively important part of health and well-being. And I guess, even though I hear you say that, Nelson Mandela also told you were a prisoner of hope, so hopefulness.
Nelson Mandela was a terrible tease of me and everybody else, because he liked to see people laugh.
Okay, right. Well, Mary, it has been beyond a privilege to sit here with you. When I look back over the people who have worked in this college, who've been trainers, who've been members and fellows, there's a lady who springs to mind called Kathleen Lynn, and she was a paediatrician. And Kathleen Lynn, she lived her life by being brave.
Yes, I know of her.
By challenging conventional wisdom, by being different. But her big motto was, above all, collaborate. And to hear you speak to us about lessons in leadership like this, about how to get on with life and how to lead by example, your integrity, your humility, and your openness to talk is a true inspiration. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Gur mahagat.
Gur míle magat.